stories are remembered 22 times more than facts alone. So first and foremost, if you're in a pitch situation, I'm gonna remember the story first. It's enabling me to take that story into somebody else in the company who probably also needs to decide to work with you. So there's a lot of people involved that are gonna decide if you're the right fit. If you don't know the right story to tell those people, they're not gonna be able to hear what you have to say.
Welcome to the Mid-Game Mindset. Join us as we dive into the pivotal moments that shape today's top sales and marketing leaders, RevOps innovators, and entrepreneurs. This is where grit meets growth and the game changes for good. If you find value in this conversation, be sure to share it with another growth leader who would enjoy it. And now, let's get to the show. Welcome to the Mid-Game Mindset. I'm your host, Rich Bishop, and today's guest is a sales trainer and speaker. He's worked with over 1,000 different companies in 40 different countries, including Google, Nike, Stanford Business School. He's the author of the book, Superpower Storytelling, and just a really big wealth of knowledge here when it comes to sales process, and sales scripts. Steven Steer. So Steven, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Rich. It's great to be here with you today, man. I'm excited to chat it up today about sales, about mindset, and everything else.
Absolutely, for sure. Oh, and one tidbit on the bio that I left out, you were in a Beyonce video?
Yeah, I was in a Beyonce video. I can start off with that story if you like. I made sure to spray cologne before I got on this call too, so I'm like extra here. Let's say 2012, 2013. I've worked a lot of jobs in my career, right? So when we get into the mid-game mindset, there's a lot of things I've done and been through that kind of helped me set a vision and a course for myself, sometimes successful, sometimes not. But along this path, one of the jobs I worked security at a very super fancy fashion house in New York City, which means I stood by the door, and if people's bags beep, I would say, hey, let me check your bag. That was my whole job. I couldn't move. I was literally stuck in a corner. It was like standing in a jail for, like I say, for like 8 hours a day. But, had student loans to pay, so I did that. One of the days I was working there, I want to say it was a Saturday or a Friday afternoon, this gentleman approaches me and basically starts hitting on me. As I saw it, he's like, oh, your style is really cool. It's really great. Like, do you want to be in Beyonce's next music video? And I was like, what? What kind of line is this? And he's like, yeah, give me your phone number. I'll text you about the video. You'll be in the video. And I was just kind of like, this is such a ridiculous request. Let's just see what happens, right?
Strange way to get a number.
Strange way to get a number, but I was like, just curious to see what thread this goes for. And then I get on break 4 or 5 hours later, and I was like, yo, check out the line this guy dropped on me today. And they're like, oh no, that's Solange's stylist. If he hit you up, he says he wants you, he's gonna have you in it. He invited us too. So sure enough, fast forward a week or two later, I do get a text. They tell me where to meet them. And then we all drive out to New Jersey to film the music video Party, of which I have a quarter of a second. You can see my face. And then I found a picture that someone took there with me standing behind Solange with a big smile. And they were all very, very nice. And it's a fun little kitschy story that is very New York in essence. Very New York.
Right place, right time, but open to the experience. So it worked well.
That's it. And a fun little tidbit to say, for sure.
All right. So tell me a little bit more about yourself on the sales training side and some of the things that you've been up to recently.
Recently, man, I'm really, really loving what we call in the biz my discovery offer, for lack of a better way to describe it. But I call it a sales elevation roadmap. And I think one of the things that differentiates me and my philosophy on sales training in general is general training gets general results. So the way I think about this is my methodology is I actually go into your business and look at your situation, interview your people, and get a picture of what's happening right now today. And I run it through a method I call CGR, which is current, what you're really doing right now, gaps in that current process, and that enables me to make recommendations. So my recommendations are tailored specifically to where your business is and what they need from a sales training perspective, assets perspective, or otherwise. And that gives us a unique framework to work off of, because that gives us a baseline and a source of truth that we both agree is happening, and then that informs where we go. So if this rep over here needs help with objection training, let's train that rep on that. If this rep needs better help on discovery, let's train them on that. Let's not just do generalized stuff and help people where they don't need help. So that's been exciting. Been doing a fair amount of speaking, which is getting some decent amount of leads, and just working through those with as much joy and attention to detail as I can. You know how it goes.
That's right.
Yeah.
I seen you were just in, was it Uzbekistan that you were just in recently?
Yeah. In May, I was in Uzbekistan. I was in Denver. I was in New York. I was in Cancun. I think I did about 23,000 miles of travel in May alone. And Germany. I forgot Germany in there as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, been on the run, man. Going to the ends of the earth to make this consulting thing work.
That's right. That's right. And you live in Mexico City, right?
I do live in Mexico City, yes.
So we talked about you were spending, obviously living in New York at the time of the Beyonce video, now in Mexico City, literally traveling all over the world, teaching your methodologies and your storytelling. I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you got into that to begin with from the security guard at the fashion house.
Oh, man. Let's give you the abridged version. So during that security time, I was also working in bars, and then I had my best friend from high school's father was a PM at a large construction company in New York, and then he and I just got along really well. He's like, hey, come work for me. So that was like my first corporate job. I worked there for maybe 4 or 5 years. They eventually got acquired by Berkshire Hathaway, and then things got really, really messy, and there was all this weird animosity. But towards my latter half of, I think it was in November of maybe 2014, probably 2014, I was working on site at the Baccarat Hotel, and the building's basically done, and I walked all the way down from the top floor, the roof, doing inspections with my foreman, and then we get to the construction entrance, and he taps me on the shoulder to go to lunch, and a cement block falls right where I was standing. I didn't have gear on. So I was like, oh man, just completely threw me for a loop. I tell that story pretty often, but it completely threw me for a loop, and I was like, man, I need to figure out what to do with my life. And I eventually came to the conclusion, I'm going to die one day. It's going to happen to all of us. But if I am going to, I want to at least give myself a shot at what I really want. What did I always want? I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to have my own company in whatever way. Then I did the audit of what skills and abilities I have and what could help me through that path. And I was like, I don't really have that much. I am good with people. Maybe that's why sales could be a good thing. So I just pounded the pavement, went to events, talked to everybody, said I was looking for a sales role, and got a bottom of the barrel sales role at a tech startup in New York, doing all the cold calling, all the cold emails, all that ugly stuff that takes to have business. But if you have sales, you have a business. That's one of the reasons it's an important skill for anybody to learn. I did okay at that, did that for a few years, and then got laid off like most of the sales team when the company wasn't doing well. Started at another company, my first remote gig, and then that one got laid off again same year after Facebook changed the algorithm for the company, so they put us out of business. Luckily for me, though, there was a consultant who had worked with us on that second company who was working with me as I built out sales. We got along super well, and then we just got along super well. So I sent him an email afterwards. I was like, "Here's what happened, and I just want to let you know I really appreciated all your help, and I look forward to working with you again in the future at some point." He got back to me, and this is Scott, who I think I introduced you to. Shout out to Scott. And he's like, "Hey, let's hop on a call. Maybe I could help you figure out what's next for you." And I was like, "Great, nice." We talk, we book a half an hour, and it turns into a 3-hour call. And at the end, he's like, "I got a job for you if you want it." And that's how I got into consulting, where I've been since. And that's how I got into this side of the space. And I think, the teacher appears when the student is ready. I've always been hungry to learn. And as most companies in early stage tech especially, they don't teach you anything. They just kind of expect you to go and produce. And in some ways I was able to do that. In other ways I wasn't. But once I met Scott, a lot of those synergies and things I needed to learn started to come together because I had someone who was willing to show me a framework and help me apply it and everything else. And I think that's when things started to rocket up huge for me.
The importance of a mentor cannot be understated, especially in sales. I mean, it's true in other areas, but entrepreneurs and sales leaders especially, there's just so much value in somebody who, number one, cares enough to take you under the wing, but number two, they usually care enough because they see something in you that maybe sometimes you don't see in yourself at the time, and they can help kind of lead you to that and help you to fulfill whatever that potential is that you have.
I 100% agree, and I'll even share more with Scott. We would run, I think we had at our peak, we maybe had 40, maybe 50 clients, and we would do a client intensive where everybody would fly in and we'd teach, or Scott would teach lots of different frameworks, more specific stuff, share data, great stories. And then one day he's like, all right, so you're speaking on Tuesday. And I was like, no, I'm not. I'm definitely not. No. I was like, what gave you that idea? He's like, no, like you're going to teach what we're doing over here. And I was like, I'm not. And he really pushed me. And I wouldn't fancy myself a speaker. I was super scared of it, all this other stuff. He's like, no, go do it. And that's a person who I can say has got me into a position to do something that I realize I'm pretty decent at and I like, and I would not have tried had he not pushed me there. Again, he saw something I couldn't see. So again, shout out to Scott.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's such a great story. And I've been in some of your workshops before, and they are high energy, they're engaging, you learn a ton. As a matter of fact, I showed the book earlier, but inside the book, I keep my notes from the workshop that we had done or that you had conducted while we were together. Awesome. So yeah, I mean, just that being the first time that you've gone through that sort of process, you obviously have really kind of honed that in and developed that over time. When did you realize that that was something that you wanted to do and that you could see the benefit that attendees were getting when you were having those conversations?
You mean speaking or you mean telling stories? Like, what do you mean specifically?
Well, I mean, if there is a difference, we could talk about the difference. But for me, your speaking, it is a lot of storytelling, and that's how you make a lot of your points in a strong way, and you tie that to the sales process as well. So how did you maybe make that connection at first? It
took me a while. It actually really took me a while. I think when I started in sales, I mean, I'd sold stuff as a kid, right? I'd sold ice pops. I would buy stuff on Craigslist and resell it, just kind of standard stuff. Not much storytelling involved in that per se. But when I got into the corporate side and working with startups, you just started to see that early salespeople sell features. We're just like, oh, here's a widget. Click the widget. The widget's going to give you another widget that has more widgets. $20,000 a month is all it takes, right? Like you just don't get much out of this. And it's all about that person who's selling that thing trying to get you to buy something versus starting to help people solve things. And I think we did a sales team-wide, company-wide pitch of the company's software. And I saw what everybody else was doing. And they were all just feature, feature, feature. They know the platform in and out, every corner of it, but it was so boring and terrible. And when it came to my turn, they did like 20-minute demos. I did a 6-minute demo, and I just made up some stuff and started talking. And I won. But I'm pretty good on my feet. That was the first indicator. Second indicator is when I had some larger pitches and I started to see that when you would mention something else a client had done, people's attention is larger. That was another indicator. And then I still didn't get it until maybe around 2017, late 2017, 2018, when I would start working directly with startups more on the consulting side. And so when you're in the one selling it, you're just kind of seeing it for the way you do it, and you don't get much feedback or start to see as many patterns unless you're really diving into your own stuff and looking. But once I started working with lots of different startups, right? I told you I've worked into the thousands of startups. You start to see you're only pitching features. I don't care about this at all. Mm-hmm. Give me something different. And once that thread was started to unspool, it was like, oh no, like the most interesting thing about you is who you are. It's not what you're doing. And then when I would ask questions, why did you decide to solve this problem? You get a really compelling and interesting story. Oh, I'm solving this medical problem because my grandfather died because he wasn't able to get proper care. They weren't able to detect it. And I was furious about that. And I cried for weeks and weeks and weeks. And I said, you know what? I need to build something that solves this problem so people don't have grief like me. Why aren't you saying that?
Yeah.
Why aren't you telling more people that? Right? So once that started to coalesce, I started to look at what was working, what wasn't working. And I guess the bigger piece that makes storytelling compelling is, number one, if you can create an emotion in somebody, they can make a decision. They're in a decision-making framework. That's the most important thing. Sales is about decisions. And if I trust you and you can create a nice emotional framework for me to relate to you through stories or otherwise, I'm going to be able to tell you yes or no because I'm actually feeling what's happening. And since 95% of decisions are made in the subconscious with emotion and backed into with 5% of logic, if you're not using and leveraging who you are and the stories and the reasons you get it, you're missing out on opportunity. So once I really started to see that as a pattern and help people deploy that in other ways and saw them get better results and saw them get wins, it was like, what are they doing? What did I teach them? And then I started to coalesce, and then one thing leads to another, and eventually I got insane enough to say, hey, I'm gonna write a book about this.
Next year's growth targets aren't going to build themselves, and guesswork isn't a strategy. Midgame Consulting's annual sales planning guide is built for CROs of high-growth, high-impact companies who want to use the latest frameworks and templates that build an integrated sales plan to start the new year off right. It's free and available for download. Just go to salesplansuccess.com. That's salesplansuccess.com. What was that process like of writing the book, and then how did you decide kind of how to organize those thoughts? Because being able to tell stories is a big concept that can feel intimidating to a lot of people.
Yeah.
How did you break that down?
Okay, so writing a book was actually really easy. Now, that sounds crazy. It just takes a long time. That's the hard part. So, right, you do jujitsu. I've done jujitsu before. Weeks and weeks and weeks and months, there's no progress. But then one day it all clicks together and you're like, there it is. I got that. Then you have it. It's the same thing with a book. And so what I do, my kind of madness, if you will, I love a method called Pomodoros. Pomodoros are a 25-minute block where you monotask. You don't do anything else for that 25 minutes. Set a timer. Timer goes off. Go back to whatever else you want to do. And so I would do one 25-minute session every day. In about 18 months is how long it took me to do the book. And I got the entire book written, and like 4 or 5 times I rewrote it. I did my minimal marketing. I got the cover design. Again, there's many things I would change in this process, but across 25 minutes a day is how I started. The first thing I would say for any person, especially a consultant or anyone who's thinking about writing a book, I didn't have ChatGPT when I did this, or it was very young, so I only used it for the bibliography. But you can do a couple of things. If you have frameworks that you teach, record yourself talking into, I talked into Google Docs. They have a talk to text function. And I just gave my trainings. And inside of a month, I had 30,000 words of my trainings. And then I spent the rest of those 25 minutes a day over the course of however long, making those trainings into readable chapters. And so I used a template. If anybody wants it, I have a book resources template I can share with your audience, and it helps you organize what chapters should look like. And I just used those thoughts and grabbed and dragged and dropped things, and then made a first version, which was a terrible, terrible version. And then I hired an editor. The editor ripped it to shreds. I rewrote it, sent it to him again, ripped it to shreds, rewrote it. And then I did that about 3 or 4 times with that same editor. And I eventually quit and published it.
All right, enough is enough.
Enough, I'm done. This needs to be out. Yeah. Because the other thing to think about for anyone who wants to write a book, yes, I hope people read it. I'm grateful that you have and you've gotten some value out of the trainings and everything. But more than anything else, it's a business card. So I'm using it as a way to say, hey, I've solidified a way that I think about things, and check me out. I'm serious about this. And I think that's opened a lot of different doors for me in the consulting space, speaking space, podcasts, and everything else. And I think from authenticity and kind of the business we're in with consulting, people don't just want a consultant. No one really wakes up and is like, hey, that's what I want to buy today. Consulting can't be sold. It can only be bought, I think. And so creating more vectors where people can engage with you how they want, like, you having a podcast here, I can get to know Rich. I can understand how Rich thinks. Who does Rich know? What informs the way Rich does what he does? Just makes it an easier on-ramp for when people are ready to buy. You've created a good canvas that showcases who and what you are and why you think differently and why you're a better fit for people. So a book was in service of that.
It makes a lot of sense. Speaking and writing, podcasting now, it all kind of works together, right, and builds off of each other in terms of being able to create that trust. Now, a lot of the audience are sales leaders, chief revenue officers, chief marketing officers, entrepreneurs of startups that are series A, B, C, right? They're moving along in the ranks. As you think about that group, being able to tell stories is important. Maybe a book makes sense for them, maybe it doesn't, but there is something to the speaking and the thought leadership side of things, and more importantly, building trust in who they are from a prospect point of view, right?
Yeah.
To help with the funding of the company, to help with sales and so on. And so as you look at that, could you speak a little bit to the importance of storytelling and putting yourself out there if you are one of those leaders, and how that builds trust even when you're not talking about the widgets that you're selling?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I think it's just the first and foremost, I think stories are remembered 22 times more than facts alone. Funny that I'm citing a fact to cite about a story. Can't remember her name. I'll get it for you so you know that I'm not making it up, but 22 times more memorable. So first and foremost, if you're in a pitch situation, I'm going to remember the story first. That's what's going to jog my memory. Also, if it's a story, it's enabling me to take that story into somebody else in the company who probably also needs to decide to work with you. When we think and break things down even further, right? There's probably, if you're a startup or you're Series A, Series B, you're probably selling to enterprise, because most venture-backed startups that look for funding are. And it's about 8 people inside of a company that need to decide on a yes to work with you, which does not include any incumbents like other providers who are doing similar services, consultants who might be inside. So there's a lot of people involved that are going to decide if you're the right fit, which means each person has their own metric and own OKRs or KPIs that they're tracking for their success in their role. If you don't know the right story to tell those people, they're not going to be able to hear what you have to say. So one thing I write about in the book and I talk about and I say, as far as stories, there's so many stories you can have. As a business person, you want to think about the problems that you solve, right? We sell outcomes and people buy outcomes. So depending on who you talk to, in a business sense, they're going to want to make more money, save money, increase efficiency, and mitigate risk. Each of those roles in the company may have a different way they think about it. A CEO of a large company wants to return value to the shareholders. Not at the expense of everything else, but if you're speaking to a CEO, that's the terms that you're going to want to speak on. By investing in this process, here's the ROI we're going to get that's going to return this value to your shareholders. Full stop. I get that. Tell a story about how you did that for another CEO. Now we're there. A CFO wants to save money for the company because their compensation package is probably predicated on how much money they can save or cost they can cut. Talk about that and how you've done that before. There's above the line and below the line sales. Below the line are people who are going to use a product or service. They care more about efficiency. Not that the others don't, but that's the language that you want to talk to them in. There's a quote I like that says, when you speak to shepherds, speak of sheep, right? Storytelling enables you to speak the language of the person that you're talking to. And when you do that, they can hear you. So whatever it is you sell, whether you're in a leadership position, you're carrying a bag and you're selling things, you want people to get on your team, and you need to be the person who the room needs. And storytelling is one of the key ways to just say, hey, I see you. I've seen people like you. We're in the right place to have a real conversation here, whether we're a fit or not. And it just lowers cortisol, right? Cortisol is the chemical that creates sales resistance. And I'm sure every person listening has felt it before. You want to do that as much as possible. And I think for anybody who is not leveraging it enough and it feels intimidating, just think about from a place of service. You're serving. And when you're serving is when you're doing your best work and when you probably have had your best relationships with your clients. A story is a first way to literally show that you're there in service. And I think it's worthwhile for people to invest some time.
That's great. And I'm sure that as we look out and think about in the past, the times where we've made some major purchases, it's usually because we've been told that story. Sometimes it's in terms of a testimonial, right? Maybe a successful customer is telling the story on behalf of the company or the service that you're looking at potentially purchasing, but there is a lot of value in being able to almost see yourself in that position where, if I have this service or I have this system that I'm looking at buying, this is what my life is going to look like afterward. And I think you hit the nail on the head. what are the motivational aspects of the people in the role that you are now trying to sell to and trying to tell that story and being able to craft the story accordingly?
Correct. They're not going to buy unless they see themselves in the outcome. And if you can speak to that metric, that or result, not saying you're going to make the sale, but you're much more likely to.
And it's interesting because when I think it was the Challenger sale, when that first came out, I want to say the metric that was used in there was something like 5 people. For some reason, 5.6 sticks in my mind. I'd have to check it to see if that's true, but I want to say it was like 5.6 people involved in the selling process. It's not surprising that that number has increased to 8 in an enterprise sale at this point.
Mm-hmm. Or more, which is insane, but it is what it is.
Yeah, it's a lot of people to try to convince with different stories along the way of how your service or product will impact them.
And that leads to another thing too, and I'm sure we've talked about it. This is where account mapping is really important. Who does need to potentially be involved based on what you've identified and what do they find important? And again, you're not always going to be right, but the fact that you're making an attempt to understand allows you to ask pertinent questions which can open up opportunities and create better relationships to bring sales towards you faster.
Yeah. So we dove in pretty quickly to the storytelling side of things. We touched a little bit about you at the beginning, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about you. And when we look at in this podcast, we talk a lot about the mid-game moment, right? This moment in time where growth leaders end up faced with a dilemma or a challenge that they end up drawing on experiences either from their personal lives, from mentors, which you had mentioned mentors being an important part of your journey, maybe books that they've read, where they've made a shift in their mindset that's helped them to kind of overcome those challenges. So as I describe that mid-game moment, are there any that pop out to you?
Yeah, the one that hits up the most right now it was during COVID times, right? So hard to believe that's five years ago, almost 6. It's wild. But I remember being in New York in my apartment, just like everybody. I wasn't doing great. I was just kind of down, and I'm used to being on the road a lot, and I was stuck at home. And I remember making a list of the smartest people I knew in my entire life, people I could like call and email and ask any life questions, and they just generally give me a little bit of tutelage. And I was like, hey, here's where I'm at, here's what I have, here's what I'm working on. What would you do in my position? And every single one of them said, I don't know, you're just gonna have to figure it out. All of them. They were like, hey, we're just trying to figure it out here. And again, that's totally reasonable because it's a strange time for everybody.
Sure.
But what that taught me was I need to follow my own advice. And the hard part of that was like, well, I need to find out what it is that I want. I need to do some soul searching in that respect and figure out what's going to help me have the best possible energy, the best mental health, and the best chance of being successful in a weird time like this where we didn't know how long it was going to take, and right 5 years ago. So I had one friend who lived in Mexico in Playa del Carmen who I hit up, and he was like, dude, you don't look well. Get out of there. Come live down here for a little while. We got the ocean. If it all gets better, you can always go back, but come here. It's cheaper than New York. You can get a chance. And I was like, you know what? That's really good counsel. So I went. I moved to Mexico in the middle of a pandemic, and I think it's one of the best decisions I ever made. And I say that because as a mid-game thing, it was like I saw where New York was going. I remember riding my bike in July. It was the only thing I could do. And I had a friend who had a WeWork membership, and he was the only person in the WeWork. He's like, yo, if you want to come, I'll work over here, you work over here, that's your bathroom, this is my bathroom, cool. And I was like, great, I get out of the house, I have somewhere to go. And it was a July day where it was uncharacteristically cold. Like July in New York is usually terrible, it's in the 90s. This day was like 50s for whatever reason, just like weird. And I had a jacket on, and I'm riding my bike with my helmet on, going down to Dumbo is where the WeWork was. And I had a thought when I was riding, I was like, it's gonna be cold in 3 months. Like it's gonna legit, I won't be able to ride my bike. I don't see this being over in 3 months. I need to get out of here. I'm not gonna, if I can't ride my bike when it's cold or starts snowing or whatever, it's like, what's going on? So once I had that thought and I had this input from my other friend, it was like, you need to figure out a way to get out of here because this is the healthiest thing to do. And so just being able to frame that for myself and bet on myself and trust myself to make such a ridiculous, difficult decision, it didn't come lightly at all. It was very, very tough. Sat down with my parents, told them what I was going to do and everything else, and I went. And I think that has been one of the most formative, biggest bets I've made on myself. And I think that has been a good canvas from which I've been able to move because I can trust my own judgment on things.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I wouldn't have been able to. Not that I wouldn't have been able to, but I was like a forcing function, as they say. I had to make a decision there, and I didn't fold under the pressure of the uncertainty. And so that I think helps with my entrepreneurial resilience, I suppose, for those tough months. Mm-hmm. But yeah, what I would say right now is the one that really stands out.
Are your go-to-market teams built for scale, or are they stuck in chaos? At Mid-Game Consulting, we turn high-growth challenges into operational wins. From sales strategy to CRM to process optimization, we help you get it right so that your organization can grow as your top line grows. Let's transform today's change into tomorrow's success. Visit midgameconsulting.com. That's midgameconsulting.com. That's such an interesting story, and it's so cool that you went ahead and did it. There are so many people that would have looked at that and been like, why am I going to move? No way. That right? But they would have then felt the mental aspects and the anguish that would have come in those cold months. Because I live in Florida. We were pretty open pretty quickly during the COVID years, and thank God we were. But I remember, wanting to travel up to New York or to go up there, and it was just so locked down that I had a number of friends that lived in the city, and they went through some serious depression as a result. So kudos to you for prioritizing your own health and then breaking through what I think seems like a really big move and a really big change to a lot of people. But once you got to Mexico and you got settled in, I bet it didn't seem that big.
No, it didn't. I mean, I love quotes. And one I've heard is decisions are only hard when you're making them. Right? So once I made the decision, I sold as many things as I could. I packed up 2 suitcases and a backpack, and I was like, all right, here I am. I'm betting on me. It was much, I was able to, I was 5 minutes from the ocean. I'd walk out of my bed and I'm in the ocean in 5 minutes walk. That's a pretty good place to recuperate and just wait things out. And I think that alone just allowed me to reset in a way that I didn't know I needed. So I say this in a couple ways. When you're in business, especially if you're in sales, you're in a high pressure environment, and the only time you maybe get to relax is the first 2 weeks of the quarter, because you're like, all right, cool, I hit my number or whatever, and it's like, all right, cool, I can do something. And you live that cycle long enough, there's stuff that's pent up that never gets you don't get a chance to address. And so, again, more of a forcing function. I never want to go back to those times, but I did get to recenter myself in many ways that I didn't know I needed. And I got to swim in the ocean every day. Pretty good.
And I hear this a lot from growth leaders in general, but the people that are in those high pressure positions that are trying to grow their companies, no matter what size the company is, yes, there's a lot of pressure. Yes, there's some cycle to it that sometimes traps them in this cycle that, quarter after quarter, I'm having to keep driving. And now that the quarter's over, well, that just means I have to get a head start now on the end of the quarter 3 months from now, right? And it's just this perpetual hamster wheel. But over and over again, I hear the importance of reconnecting back with nature to help reset the clock and reset the stress. For you, it was the ocean. For others, it's getting up into the mountains and going hiking, right? But some way of reconnecting with nature. It sounds like that was important to you.
Yeah, I think I didn't realize, right? I lived in New York City. It's where I'm from. There's probably pretty hard pressed to find a tree in most places of New York City, unless you're in Manhattan or in Central Park or Prospect Park. And mine was no different. I lived in a very noisy, crowded place. And once I got away from that, I was like, wow. And I've been to places before, but I never spent really significant time in those things. And I think, again, there's a lot of noise around, and a lot of it's in your head. And if you don't get a chance to sort through what that noise is, it's hard for you to find any signal at all. And thankfully, I was of the type of mind where I was like, I need to do this, and I had some good support, and Mexico's lovely. It also helps a lot.
For sure, yes.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get the cold weather.
No, I'm done. I can't do it anymore, man. I was in Armenia earlier this year, and I saw snow for the first time in 6 years, and I was like, oh, this is why I hate this stuff. Oh my goodness, I completely forgot. It was like 18 degrees, and I'm just like, man, never again. Never again.
Yeah, man, that's why I live in Florida. Same reason. And
Well done, well chosen, Rich.
That's right, that's right. So as we get ready to wrap up, I'd love to find out from you. It sounds like you've had a couple of major challenging points during your career that you were able to get through. Who or what challenged you the most in your career, and how did that impact and help you become who you are today?
I think the biggest challenge is kind of for our last conversation is, when is the right time to quit something? I think when I almost died in that construction accident and I started to get into sales, I had a lot of hunger, a lot of ambition. I was ready to learn. I was very raw. And that kept me going for a long time, like a really long time. I was like, yo, I want this so bad. And I think that's an important thing to have. However, up to certain points, it's important to understand why that's the thing that you want. And I think from being as my brother would say, a type A person, where I'm up at 4:30 in the morning, I'm hitting it really hard. That's just how I am. But not only what are you doing, right? Activity doesn't mean productivity. So I think that's always been a challenge for me. It's like, yo, I'm going to get in here, I'm going to do the work, I'm going to sit down, and I'm going to get it done. But why am I doing these things? And I think that has been a motif that I have worked on exploring more and more, especially lately, of what's the right thing to be doing, but why am I doing that thing? And if I don't have a clear enough reason, it's like, oh, maybe I should remove that. And that creates a different space and levity in the business and in everything else. So I'd say that motif of hunger is good, but it needs to be concentrated and pointed in the right direction. And having people like Scott, shout out to Scott again, who I could be like, hey, can I just bend your ear for a little bit? Here's what I'm thinking, here's what I'm going through, to get perspective on what that looks like. That's been super formative. Other than that, I'd say just why I started this whole thing. I didn't get any training right when I first started. So I wanted to be the help I didn't have. And that, I think, has been a challenge in its own self, because it's just recognizing that you can't save everybody, number one, and then two, just are you doing the right thing? Why are you doing the thing? So that's been on my mind a lot lately. I don't know if that answers your question. I rambled a little bit, but
no, it absolutely does, and it's interesting because there are a couple of things that I want to address, and I'll try to keep them in a logical order here. But first, you talked about being able to step back and look at what you're doing and make sure that you're evaluating your purpose for doing said thing, right? We get into these habits and these patterns. Sometimes it's really hard to interrupt that pattern and be able to step back and look at it objectively. So is there a tool or something that you use to help you kind of interrupt that pattern and go, whoa, wait a second, let me evaluate what's going on here?
Great question. First one I would say is get some nature time, get away. There's something about unplugging. I don't want to be woo-woo here, but get grounded. There's a reason it works. That's the first thing I would say. Once you have that, there's a framework I like which goes results, beliefs, and choices. So if you don't like the results you're getting, you need to look back at your choices. If the choices you've made don't necessarily support you getting the right results that you want, you need to look back at what you believe. And again, that's not an easy thing to do, but I think a lot of this, we're talking about mid-game mindset. Mindset is a series of beliefs. If you're not regularly running your beliefs through some type of audit system, I'm not saying it has to be every day because that sounds intense, but like maybe every 6 months, every year, just make it a part of who you are. That's going to give you a lot of clarity on where you probably need to make some changes in your life or in your business or otherwise. And so I just encourage folks, like, get out of nature, whatever way that looks. Just get away from your screen. The answer isn't more information. There's too much information. You need less, and you need time to process that less information in a real cogent way. So get out of the way, away from the computer, and then just take some notes, get a pen and pad, and just write down what it is, what results did you get? What choices did you make to get to those results? And what is it that you believe? What are the core tenets of belief that you have? And probably in there's some disconnect, which is the thing that can make this next moment, your mid-game, change.
I love it. And one tip as well, and I don't always follow this. I need to do a better job of this. So just admitting that up front, but blocking a day on your calendar, whether it's once a month or once a quarter, to keep it clear and just plan on a thinking day really is helpful. It's hard to maintain, but when you do it, it really does help provide the space that you need to leave the house or leave the office, go somewhere that you can be away, and you've got the right environment to be able to think through some of those things. But reviewing your calendar, reviewing the results that you've been getting, and really thinking through what is it that we need to do in order to make adjustments or changes moving forward. Having that block really gets helpful.
Definitely is. And again, like, ask for help. There's another person. Once you do that, have a friend or a mentor you call up and say, here's what I've uncovered. Is there anything you see or anything you know about me that I should consider? And that's where you make extreme leaps.
Yes. Having that accountability partner is important.
It's a big thing. It's definitely a big thing.
The other thing that came up as you were going through and giving that answer, which was really insightful, is I've now heard from a few of our guests that we've had on recently, going back to Courtney Turek, looking at Morgan Gebhardt, who was just on recently. They also talked about how important it is to know when to step away from something and when not to keep banging your head against the wall. So the more conversations you have, it's interesting to pick out some of these patterns. That is becoming a very clear pattern from people that we've seen, that it's letting go of what may be serving you okay now, but to be able to reach for and to get to something better, you've got to free yourself up from whatever that first thing is, and knowing when to walk away.
Yeah, and again, this is a tough part, I think, as entrepreneurs, as sales leaders and everything else. We bang our head against the wall. That's kind of our job in a way, right? Like, oh, it doesn't matter what happened. The number still has to be the number, or whatever way you want to think about it. We live in that world. We chose that world. But having that chance to analyze it and understand is really important. And I think that's the difference. You just have to know when it's like, you know what, this isn't it. And that's okay. Right. And it's okay that happens. It's okay to make a change.
Well, Stephen, you have some really good nuggets of information that you dropped on us today. If people want to follow you, or to learn more, or to even look at some of the training and your book, how do they do that?
First and foremost, thank you for having me, man. It's great to chop it up with you and just talk life, talk sales, talk everything else, kind of mirroring some of our in-person conversations. So Again, thank you for that. And shout out to you for starting this podcast. I'm wishing you a lot of success here. If anybody wants to get in touch with me, you can find me at Stephen Steers, StephenSteers.com. And if you want some of the resources we talked about, that book writing guide /podcast, you will see book writing guide. That's one of the places you can get resources, trainings, and learn anything you want about me.
That's great. Stephen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Rich. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for joining us on the Mid-Game Mindset. If today's episode sparked a new idea or helped shift your perspective, share it with someone who's ready to grow. Subscribe, leave a review, and keep playing the game. With the right mindset, the best moves are still ahead. Until next time, keep changing the game.